So listen to everybody. Nobody believes in you. What are you prepared to do about it? Don't let no one come into your house, take your meal, do what you need to do today. I'm not nervous. I'm just telling you.
Welcome back to Bettrmma, the best MMA ASMR on MMA YouTube. We are talking about 5 questions that are going to be answered by the end of UFC 300. Now, of course, the fights themselves are going to answer some questions in terms of who's getting the title shot next, in terms of Charles Oliveira, Arman Tsarukyan, or Jiri Prochazka, Alexander Rakic. But beyond those simple questions that will be answered by these fights, I want to take a deeper look into the stylistic questions that are going to be answered. Because, of course, what makes this sport so great is the expectations that we have of how a fight is going to go in our head before the fight happens, and then how the fight actually plays out, what we actually see in the cage, and what transpires and what we learn from it. These are some broader perspective questions that are going to be answered at UFC 300. So jumping right into it with, is combat sambo and the Eastern style of wrestling the kryptonite for Charles Oliveira? Unfortunately, I have picked Arman Tsarukyan in this matchup, and that is like stabbing myself in the heart because I want nothing but for Charles Oliveira to be successful, continuing in his career and in life. But at the end of the day, Charles Oliveira has made great money. He's going to be fine. And I do think that Arman Tsarukyan has a very difficult style for Charles Oliveira to finish, for one. And two, we have seen Charles Oliveira controlled in the grappling exchanges when it comes to his fight with Islam Makhachev. Is Arman Tsarukyan as high level of a grappler as Islam Makhachev? This is part of the question that will be answered. Ultimately, it's going to be the grappling exchanges between Charles Oliveira and between Arman that are going to be answering all these questions for us. You know, how does Arman Tsarukyan defend against Charles Oliveira's submission attempts? Because of course there will be plenty of them. How does Arman Tsarukyan control Charles Oliveira positionally in the grappling? Is he able to get dominant mount position like Islam Makhachev did? Is he able to go for head and arm chokes or other submissions on Charles Oliveira? Or will Charles Oliveira be one step ahead of him like he is against so many of his opponents? It's that South Caucasus region which Arman Tsarukyan originates from, and their fighting style is very much based upon sound defense first and strong technique. All in all, the biggest question here is how high level is Arman Tsarukyan's grappling? Because Arman Tsarukyan loves to initiate takedowns from the clinch when it comes to trips and throws, and we know that Charles Oliveira loves to pull guard. So it's not a matter of if this fight is going to the ground, it's only a matter of when. I would put money on it that we're getting to the ground in under 90 seconds or at least under 2.5 minutes. How does Arman Tsarukyan's ground and pound look against Charles Oliveira? And I think Charles Oliveira can look so invincible when he's able to take shots against these great strikers like Poirier and Gaethje and Chandler. But of course, when it gets into Charles Oliveira's realm, he looks like an unbeatable monster on the ground. And as we saw against Islam Makhachev, once he met his match, that fight became a lot more decisive one way or the other. So I think Arman Tsarukyan has a particular style of the Caucasus region that is very based around just controlling the fight. Controlling the fight, where it takes place, and what takes place within the fight. Charles Oliveira's game thrives off of pushing his opponents on their back foot, overwhelming them, forcing them into mistakes, and either knocking them out or getting their neck. Arman Tsarukyan's game is based around maintaining his composure. It's like an unstoppable force versus an immovable object in this fight. And I think the language in which this fight will be spoken will happen on the ground. Moving on to, Is Alex Pereira the greatest striker we've ever seen at the heavier weight divisions? That's the question that's being answered. It was no doubt once he knocked out Israel Adesanya in the 5th round of their fight that he is truly one of, if not the best strikers we've ever seen at the middleweight division. Of course, he absolutely starched Sean Strickland, even though I feel like his stoppage against Yuri Prochazka was a bit early. To be fair and square, he had a perfect slip counter that knocked Prochazka down. I don't think there's anybody we've ever seen at middleweight or light heavyweight who is as dangerous a striker as Alex Pereira. I think Alexander Gustafsson would probably give Alex Pereira an amazing fight, and I'm sure a prime Alexander Gustafsson mixing in the takedowns could put on a masterclass performance about Alex Pereira. It is really a glorified kickboxing belt which is being held right now, and Jamal Hill intends on making it a glorified kickboxing belt because he doesn't want to win this fight by a takedown. So this fight is the fight of who is the best MMA kickboxer in the world right now. Is it Jamal Sweet Dreams Hill or Alex Poatan Pereira? And I think we are at the highest level of striking we've ever seen in UFC history and kickboxing history, with the level of technique, traps, feints, the levels and tunnels to the striking game, which we have now that didn't exist even 5-10 years ago. It's truly another level. And I think that every fight that we have at a high level, whether it's in the UFC or in kickboxing, it is the prime examples of the best strikers we've ever seen in the world. Now, there can be some exception to that here or there because there are timeless greats such as Saenchai, Bukaw, Bernard Hopkins. There are the timeless wonders of the world that do exist, and they come about every once in a while. We're getting to a point of mythical aura with Pereira. When he got clipped and knocked out by Izzy, it was shocking, yes, but we saw him get rocked in the first fight. In all honesty, I do think a lot of that was because of the weight cut. So to see Pereira at a healthy 205, let's see what Jamal Hill can do against him. The biggest question for Jamal is the fact that Alex Pereira has been able to find the defensive openings against Yuri Prochazka, Sean Strickland, and Israel Adesanya, 3 former UFC champions. Now, it's going to be such a huge statement if Alex Pereira is not able to find such openings on Jamal Hill, and Jamal Hill is actually able to turn the tables. Either way, a huge statement is going to be made. I think the bigger statement will be Jamal Hill knocking out Alex Pereira. That's my pick for this fight. Check out the picks video if you haven't seen it already. Yeah, is Alex Pereira the greatest light heavyweight striker ever? Or is it Jamal Hill? That's the question that's being answered here at UFC 300. Moving on to Yuri Prochazka versus Alexander Rakic. Now, I have to bring this up because this question is essentially brought up and answered every single time Yuri Prochazka fights. And that is, does being Tony Ferguson actually work at the light heavyweight division? Now, of course, I'm joking in some sense. Yuri Prochazka isn't a carbon copy of Tony Ferguson. He doesn't have near the agility, speed, or jiu-jitsu that Tony Ferguson has. Most of that is due to the speed and physical limitations of being a 205-pounder compared to a 155-pounder, and the speed differences there. But Yuri Prochazka has a reckless abandon and a complete disregard for his own defense. And as a result of this, Yuri Prochazka's fate in the fighting game will inevitably be horrible CTE-induced retirement. As we know in Yuri Prochazka's fighting style, his most favorite thing to do is to intercept his opponent when he perceives his opponent is throwing a shot or coming in. Yuri Prochazka loves to lunge in at offbeat timing to catch his opponents off guard. From a mental, creative, martial artist standpoint, Yuri Prochazka chooses to play a higher limit, higher risk, higher reward gamble of a fight. Alexander Rakic wants to shoot a double leg and hold Yuri Prochazka up against the canvas or up against the fence for 15 minutes to get a win. Do you want that to be your world champion? No. And the MMA gods don't want it to be your world champion. And that's why Yuri Prochazka is going to win this Saturday against Alexander Rakic. And it's going to be another prime example of what having creative, unorthodox, out-of-the-box head movement, striking angles, offbeat timing favors you in modern MMA. It's like fighting a Cuban-style Olympic boxer. If you don't have the mind and the technique built to counteract that style, you can be Rafael dos Anjos, you can be Volkan Oezdemir, you can be Glover Teixeira. You will get overwhelmed by the unorthodox nature. If he wears down on your fundamentals enough, you will make a mistake, and Yuri will cinch up a submission or knock you out cold. Is Yuri Prochazka that guy? Is he still the boogeyman? Next big question that needs to be answered at UFC 300. Is Aljamain Sterling a legit 145-pound contender? Aljamain Sterling is a great wrestler and grappler, but how does it look against an actual 145-pound frame like Calvin Kattar? They're doing him a favor by giving him somebody like Calvin Kattar and not somebody with a grappling base. Can Aljamain Sterling really impose his will the same way that he can against somebody like a Corey Sandhagen? Does Aljamain Sterling actually have the strength to out-wrestle a guy like Calvin Kattar and submit him? Or is Calvin Kattar going to be able to shrug him off, start landing heavy boxing combinations on him, and pushing him up against the fence and landing heavy shots to the body? I could see Calvin Kattar dropping and clipping Aljamain Sterling in this fight. And this question is not only is Aljamain a legit 145-pounder, but is he a legit dominant grappling force at 145 pounds? Because we know that he's not going to be doing anything when it comes to the striking against these guys like Ilia Topuria, the champion right now. And that's the only fight that matters for somebody like Aljamain Sterling. The only thing that he needs to be working on is being a grappling specialist and a submission specialist at 145. If he's not able to implement that game plan and do it with flying colors in this fight, I would say that's a big red flag for Aljamain Sterling's career, because now you just moved up a weight class and realize you can't have the same success you had down at 135. So Aljamain Sterling needs to ragdoll Calvin Kattar and look like Aljamain Sterling Nurmagomedov. Last big question that needs to be answered: is Cody Garbrandt back? Is the Cody Garbrandt renaissance upon us? Now, when Cody Garbrandt beat Trevin Jones, I was so happy and honestly stunned, because I had lost all hope for Cody Garbrandt at that point. I thought he was going to get another knockout loss and eventually get cut. After that fight, has a decent performance against Brian Kelleher. Yes, he did get the knockout finish. It looked great, but it was against Brian Kelleher, who didn't really pose anything dangerous for Cody Garbrandt. So not the most dangerous fight for Cody Garbrandt there. But against Deiveson Figueiredo, any shot that Fig throws can get Cody Garbrandt on Queer Street. And I'm talking about a jab. Deiveson Figueiredo steps in so hard on his lead jab, it only takes one shot in this fight for Cody Garbrandt to get on Queer Street and for Deiveson to either finish him off with a big overhand right and some punches, or to get his back and submit him. Of course, Deiveson Figueiredo has the more tricky submission game. People should be counting Cody Garbrandt out in this fight. You know, it doesn't make sense for Cody Garbrandt to win this fight unless it's by some miraculous knockout. And that's the puncher's chance that we're willing to give Cody here. So it's really one of these questions that isn't even necessarily going to be answered by Davison Figueiredo or Cody Garbrandt, but it's going to be answered by the MMA gods. Is Cody Garbrandt's rise back to the top 15, will it be put to rest by a KO or a submission that breaks the hearts of Cody Garbrandt fans? Or are we going to see Cody Garbrandt open up UFC 300 with a legendary UFC moment that we're going to remember for the rest of our lives? These are the special things that are going to be in the air when UFC 300 commences. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. Yeah, thank you guys so much for supporting Bettrmma, the best MMA ASMR on MMA YouTube. Like, comment, subscribe. I appreciate it. Peace.